New report ranks Afghanistan as the most dangerous country in the world for women. The study by the Thomson Reuters Foundation says high maternal mortality rates and lack of access to healthcare and education contributed to the finding. Tonight we'll be putting Afghanistan firmly in the spotlight. First up, let's talk about leadership. President Hamid Karzai has now privately announced he intends to step down in 2014. That is according to the US Defense Secretary Robert Gates, who told a Senate panel on Wednesday. The country's constitution limits presidents to 2 terms in office. Hamid Karzai was re-elected back in 2009 after his chief rival dropped out of the runoff. That election was marred by widespread fraud claims. Now we're looking at aid. 2014, as it turns out, will be a key year for Afghanistan. It's when the US hopes to hand over authority and when many of its 100,000 troops should be back on home soil. In the meantime, America has spent billions there trying to rebuild and develop. But in a country torn apart by decades of war, do good intentions necessarily mean good investments? Nick Payton-Walsh takes a look.
A generous, state-of-the-art gift from the American people to keep the lights on in Kabul. A power plant magnificent in design and in cost. $300 million before anyone had even switched it on. But American planners forgot one thing. Could Afghanistan afford the fuel to keep it going? You can listen to the answer here. Much of the time, the plant stays silent. That's because the diesel fuel that it runs on is so expensive that to run it at even half capacity could cost the Afghan government up to $100 million a year. Its high-tech turbines are on about 7% the amount planned. A white elephant, some say, but its sponsors say its occasional backup power is vital.
What I think the person on the street would probably tell you is that he or she is pretty satisfied by the fact that power, which was available 2 to 4 hours a day in 2009, is now largely available 24 hours a day.
But to many, it's a symbol of the billions America spent here without asking itself, will Afghans be able to pay for this once we're gone? The same question about this, a huge network of highways built for over $2.5 billion.
It's a vast project running around the country through some of its least safe areas, meant to breathe the life of trade between cities.
There's a few glitches, though. Much of it's made of asphalt, which some US officials admit is very hard to repair here. And then there's the burden of maintaining it for heavy use. US aid thinks that will cost $170 million every year. The roads here are very broken, this trucker says, because of the large loads they carry. In real terms, for Afghans working here, the $3,600 Hajibullah earns in a year is equivalent to the cost of maintaining just 100 meters of road. It's one thing if power plants and roads run out of money when the Americans leave. It's another when medical care is affected. People in central Kabul's hospital will feel it hard. Care is free here, but these high-tech devices America paid for are not. And without continued huge input of cash from donors, they could stay off permanently. America's gifts so costly, Afghanistan so broke, that the bid to give them everything risks coming to nothing. Nick Payton-Walsh, CNN, Kabul.
Dozens of countries have pledged billions since the conflict in Afghanistan began in 2001, but there's a big difference between pledging and actually paying up. Now, according to a review by the Afghan Finance Ministry, a total of $62 billion was pledged between 2001 and 2009, but only $36 billion was actually paid. The US remains by far the biggest donor, spending something like $23.4 billion over the 8-year period. That's still short of what's pledged by more than $5 billion, though. Sweden puts its money where its mouth is, and it's translating 90% of pledges into concrete funding, so a good example of actually keeping up with promises. And in 2009, they spent $92 million in aid. And the United Kingdom, well, also a generous donor, and is increasing aid from $812 million to $1.1 billion by 2014. Well, will it be money spent wisely? We're going to talk a bit more about that with Michael Semple. He's a former deputy to the European Union Special Representative to Afghanistan. He's with us now from Boston in Massachusetts. These projects they've been spending on have been, you can't discredit them because they're a great idea, but was it done in the wrong way? Was the money spent in an inappropriate manner?
Well, first of all, I think you have to put it into perspective because now we're looking at the civilian assistance. The civilian assistance has only been about 1/10 of the total spending in Afghanistan in the period that you were talking about, up to 2009. 9 times more than that was actually being spent on the military program. So yes, it's a challenge to run the civilian aid programs properly, but it's important to do. And in the long run, I think that we're going to be seeing a running down of the military spending as the troops come home, and to maintain stability in Afghanistan into the future. I think that people are going to be relying on the civilian assistance program, which is why it's so important to get it right.
Yeah, on a positive note, give us an example though where aid money has actually been really effectively spent and has made a huge difference.
I'll give you 2 examples. I mean, I think that your segment was sort of saying that somehow Afghans might not be able to afford their roads. I think after the troops have gone home, one of the things that Afghans will rate favorably and said the United States did well while it was here will be precisely this network of roads ringing around the country, even though many of them are surfaced with asphalt. And I think that Afghans will find it a priority to maintain those roads and to keep up with the asphalt. But the roads are sort of like very big and fancy projects. Some of the money has gone into much smaller projects which happen at a village level, where it's groups of 25 or 30 families get together. It's a program called the National Solidarity Program, which has helped communities across the country build small irrigation schemes, put in small generators to offer light at night to villages, and even build their local school. Most of the money which has gone into that program has been well spent, and most Afghans that I and many other people who had a chance to ask about are satisfied with the way that's gone.
In terms of those big infrastructure projects though, are you worried, are people worried, experts worried that over time they will gradually degrade from very good standards right now just because the Afghans won't be able to keep up with maintenance?
Well, the hope is that if there's any kind of stability in Afghanistan, then the government will at least have the capacity to maintain the basic infrastructure, like putting on a surface on the roads. Now, of course, that depends on something like peace in Afghanistan. Some of us, during the period of the 80s, watched the infrastructure that the Soviets had put in, the national road system the Soviets had helped build. We saw it gradually degrade, not because the country inherently couldn't afford to maintain them, but because there was a war on which stopped anyone maintaining them. If we can manage to bring the war to an end, then there's a chance that the Afghan government will maintain this infrastructure.
Okay, Michael Semple, thank you very much indeed for joining us, discussing the great problems long-term on keeping up with restructuring those infrastructure projects in Afghanistan.